what I want to do now is use these pieces sort of and put them straight up so they form a kind of wall, and add some spheres so that we can start destroying them. First of all, let's dive into the Geo Fracture and make a new null so I can reference it easier. So let's say 2dbuzz, and let's give this RBD as a name. One other thing, I'm going to rewind my timeline so that all my dynamics don't need to be calculated, they can just start at 1. Before I start creating anything more, I'm also going to go into the AutoDop network, maybe rename this and delete what I don't need, such as this merge, because if this merge is still in there, then it might think like, oh, I need to add this glue to this dynamics network, and that's not what I want. So let's delete that, and let's name it cloth dops, and I'm gonna turn it off so it's completely not being used. Let's create a new geometry object, and let's call this one pieces RBD. Alright, dive inside, let's get rid of that, do an object merge, get your geometry from your fracture. There we go, there's my fracture, there's my 2dbuzz. Okay, and I'm going to transform it so that it's standing. So let's move it up, or rather rotate it first, and then let's see how much ish. So that'll be about 5. Alright, okay, now we need 2 spheres, so let's create some new geometry. Let's call it Geo Sphere 01. Dive inside, get rid of that, create a new sphere. Let's make it into a polygon. Let's turn this to wire to see where the center is. So there's the center, so I kind of want to put it over there, so let's add a transform to this guy. Transform, and let's move it up a bit, something like that. Okay, and let's move it out, so something like this. Yeah? One last thing I might do is just make it look a little bit more like a bullet, so it'll go through a bit better. Okay, and let's make another sphere, jump inside, and I'm gonna offset that sphere so that it kind of goes through the other center, which should be about there. So something like that, that'll do. And I'm gonna offset it backwards, and then I'm gonna change the initial velocity for both so that this guy basically will hit first, but this guy will hit straight after, but a lot faster with a bit more force. Alright, so let's do that. Now one final thing I want to do is create my own DOP network, sort of. I'm gonna call it, I don't know, maybe wall pieces RBD. Okay, and then I want to select this guy and turn it into a rigid body object. So I'm gonna choose a rigid body glue object because I want to have the pieces sort of, I want to have them together. So let's select this, say RBD glue. Let's have a look if it did that in there. No, it's not in there, so it must be in the other one then. Probably got confused, so let's have a look. Okay, so it added a merge, so let's just get them out of there. We don't want them in there. Control X, go up, and let's paste them in there. That's where we want them. Okay, this will all work, but we're gonna have to change our path, right? We're gonna have to change our path of our pieces because the DOP import over there will probably not reference correctly. Instead of cloth DOPs, we named it wall pieces RBD. So let's just grab that name, go inside there, and let's just name it there as such, and this one as well, the network as well. Okay, so hopefully that'll do the job. It should be still the same. And pieces RBD should be the same as we just copied this, right? So this is our glued wall, right? So let's get our wall, and I'm gonna give it some glue, right? Some internal glue so that the objects kind of stick together, and something like 20 will do for now. Okay. One other thing that I want to add is a ground plane so that the pieces have something to fall on. So let's add a ground plane to this. Okay, let's have a look. So there's the ground plane object, and gonna move it a bit. There's my wall, and it's been added over there, right? Know that the relationship is left to right, and it's gonna collide, so left inputs affect right, so the ground plane, which is static, will affect the pieces. Now all I need to add is a bit of gravity to these pieces, and also I need to bring in my my moving spheres, right? So let's make these spheres into rigid body objects. So let's say this is one. Let's have a look now if it was added properly. Should have been added there, so there we go. There's my first sphere. And there's my wall, there's my first sphere. It's got its solver on it. And let's add the second sphere. So the second sphere as well, so just create this into a rigid body object. Let's dive back in. And there's the second sphere. Okay. So now we want to give our spheres a little bit of initial velocity so they kind of start, going in there. So let's have a look. We want them to go in minus x, there's the x, so minus x by a certain force. So let's try minus x and give them some initial speed. This guy is something like minus 15, the other guy maybe minus 20, a bit more, that's this one. Right, and then we can have it start solving. So let's have a look if this works. Now it's a good idea at this point to save as well, because let's have a look, fracture. It might be a bit unstable. Dynamics generally tend to have a habit of being a bit unstable. Okay, let's save it and let's try running it. This is gonna calculate. Now the first time it runs through, it most likely will take a long time to calculate these things because it's kind of solving, but then as it goes through, it has to calculate the SDF, sine distance function, to sort of approximate the geometry, approximate the pieces. If we want to adjust that, we can have more accurate collisions, more accurate calculations going on. But so yeah, this will take quite a while, so you can just either wait for it, or, and that's what I'll do, as you can see the pieces are kind of starting to come out. I'm going to do similar as we did with the pops or with the cloth. We can just bake it out back to disk, right? So I'm cancelling it now, it's stopping, right? But you can kind of see this sphere is now going through, right? And it'll be also faster if you just calculate it to disk, because it won't need to, this one is going through and that guy is going through. It won't really need to show it. It won't need to visualize it. So that kind of helps as well. So let's go into our pieces, right, over there. And again, add a ROP output driver, as such. And into the hip, we're just going to go into our BGeo, make a new folder. Let's call this RBD wall A sim. And let's say sim, so we know. And let's go name that as well, like that. And add padding to this. Okay, accept. And then basically same thing as with the previous output. I'm just going to use 10, but you can use more if you wanted to. I'm going to copy this path and put it in there. I'll give an error, nothing has rendered out yet, so let's rewind this and render out the first 10 frames, right? So it's writing it out. Over there needed to calculate because the cache wasn't updated. Okay, and it's almost done, and there we go. So now basically I just wrote out the first 10 frames, so let's have a look what that gives us. So bam, and it kind of breaks apart. Now I'm just going to make sure that some of these things are not visible, such as I don't want the ground plane object there, I don't want the wall pieces, and the spheres at the moment, well, they can be, I'm not gonna bake them out to disk right now. I could do that as well, but yeah, this is kind of the effect. Obviously you gotta be very careful not to go over, but there you can kind of see it. If I put this to 10, so you can kind of see the pieces go through, and at the same time the rest of the wall still maintaining or trying to maintain its strength. You know, I'll leave it up to you to calculate the entire thing if you want to. Okay, in the next example what I'm going to do is I'm going to use sort of similar pieces, and I'm going to use a cookie operation inside of a for loop and split an object such as a sphere in all these kind of random patterned pieces.